Hello, this is a video lecture for the urinary system. So the urinary system is a very important system in the body because its purpose is to filter the blood and remove waste from the body. So as I'm sure you imagine, this is quite important because as wastes build up, the animal is going to get more and more sick. So we need a way of getting rid of those wastes. So this is a little diagram of the urinary system. So this guy right here, that's the kidney. And most animals are born with two. Occasionally there are a congenital condition where maybe one kidney isn't functioning or isn't present, but for the most part, most animals are born with two kidneys. So kidneys have a functional filtering unit called the nephron. So these guys are responsible for doing the actual filtering of the blood. So they remove waste from the blood. So two of common wastes that are removed are urea and creatinine, which are byproducts of nutrient digestion. And then the kidney keeps important things that the body needs, things like glucose, which is used for energy, or electrolytes, which are important in water balance. The kidney is also able to concentrate urine or dilute urine where appropriate. So concentrated urine means that the animal's body is keeping as much water as possible. So when an animal is dehydrated, they're going to try to keep as much water as they can. If an animal's had plenty to drink, the urine will be more dilute, which means that there's going to be much more water in it. Like the water to waste ratio is going to be significantly higher, that there's more water. So I'm sure you've seen this in action yourself. So you've had a really busy day, you haven't had a lot of time to have some water, you go to the bathroom and you see that your urine is like a really dark yellow. Maybe you've had other times, maybe you're out for some beverages with friends and you go to the washroom and your urine is basically water. You can't see any color to it at all because you've had so many beverages. So that shows us right there the example of the body getting rid of excess water or retaining as much water as they can. So there are times though when the kidney is not functioning properly. So if you have a sick animal and the kidney isn't functioning, we're going to see that the kidneys aren't able to concentrate or dilute the urine at all. And in which case the concentration of the urine is going to be the same as blood. And that's called isotonic to blood when the concentrations are the same. So that's the kidney. It's doing all the filtering. So once the kidney has filtered out the blood, it makes the urine and then sends that urine down these guys here. These are the ureters. The ureters are the tubes that carry urine from the kidneys to this guy here, the bladder. So I guess we should technically call it the urinary bladder, to be most specific. So the urinary bladder is basically a sac that fills with urine. So the kidneys are kind of constantly doing their filtering and sending urine down into the bladder. But the urinary bladder doesn't need to be emptied constantly. So what it does is it's like a storage sac. It holds that urine until it gets nice and full, and then stretch activators are activated in the bladder. So very similar to the way the rectum is, right? Feces are stored in the rectum. Once the stretch receptors are activated, then it signals to the body to move the bowels. And then same with the urinary system. The urinary bladder has those stretch receptors. Once those stretch receptors are activated, it sends a signal to the animal that they need to empty the bladder. I'm sure we're all familiar with those stretch receptors. It can be quite uncomfortable if you have to eliminate, but you are waiting or have to wait for a certain amount of time. That can be very uncomfortable. And then lastly, the last part here is the urethra. So the urethra is the tube that carries urine from the bladder to the outside of the body. So the urethra is what allows the animal to void that urine. So urethra in the female exits in the vulva. And in the male, it exits through the penis. So the urethra is part of the male reproductive system, but it is not part of the female reproductive system. So it isn't related at all to what's going on reproductively with the female. And we'll see when we cover in the reproductive system, you'll see where the urethra is involved in the male reproductive, but not at all involved in the female reproductive. So an interesting thing about the urinary system is that it's very important, as we know, but sometimes animals will become sick where their kidneys are stopping working. So if it's a chronic kidney disease, so remember that chronic means it is a progressive onset, and it's basically like a lifelong condition. Those kidneys are going to get worse and worse with time. Animals don't actually show any signs of kidney disease or illness until the kidneys are 75% damaged. That's a remarkable statistic. That at 75% damaged, that means that the animal's really actively sick. That's like a stage 4 animal when they're that sick. So animals don't show signs of being ill until they're really ill. So it is a good idea to do annual or semi-annual, so twice yearly, blood work on older pets so that we can detect kidney disease prior to the animal getting to that 75% damaged and showing clinical signs. So that's a big part of why we want to do senior wellness exams and blood work on our senior pets. We want to see if their urinary system or their kidneys aren't working properly so we can start supporting them earlier than later. Okay, so let's talk about a few of the terms for the urinary system. So once again, I have the old version of this sheet, so it's going to look a little bit different than yours. Sometimes the urinary and the reproductive systems are spoken about together. And in that case, they're called either the urogenital system or the genitourinary system. I prefer urogenital. I think it just sounds more pleasant than genitourinary. But either way can technically be correct terms when you're talking about the two together. So there are some terms associated with the urinary system that you should know. I'll move this over a bit so you can see a bit better. So cystocentesis. So if we look at our word part, centesis is the surgical puncture to remove fluids, and then the cyst is referring to the urinary bladder. So the surgical puncture of the urinary bladder to collect urine. Basically, we take a needle, poke it into a full bladder, extract the urine, and then move on with our day and do the testing. So a cystocentesis is going to get us the most sterile urine sample because it's coming directly from the bladder and hasn't had a chance to be contaminated by passing through the outer parts of the urinary system. So anuria, again, word parts, urea is referring to urine, and an is a lack of. So a lack of urine, the complete suppression of urinary secretion by the kidneys, so no urine. Dysuria is difficult or painful urination. Hematuria, hemat is referring to blood, so that's blood in the urine. Glucoseuria, that's a condition where glucose is in the urine, so we'll see glucoseuria when an animal has diabetes. So remember we talked about those nephrons, the filtering units of the kidney? They keep important things like glucose and electrolytes. So glucose is a form of energy. Our body wants to keep as much energy as it can get so that we don't end up being in an energy deficit. In a condition like diabetes though, there is a really big excess of glucose. So in that case, the nephrons have a threshold that they meet. Once that threshold for glucose is met, anything above that threshold gets sent out in the urine. When an animal has glucoseuria, you'll see you'll feel that the urine is sticky. It is sugar in the urine, so it's a very sticky consistency. The full name for diabetes is diabetes mellitus, and mellitus means honey, and that's because of that sticky urine. Oliguria, so olig meaning scant, so that's a scant urine output. Polyuria is increased urination. Oh, we don't. What does polyuria always go hand in hand with? Polydipsia, increased thirst. Pyuria is pus in the urine. Nephra we know has to do with the kidney, right? Because nephrons are the filtering units. So anyway, that's one of the root words we have for kidney. Rene is another root word for kidney. Uropoiesis. So right below here, poiesis as a suffix means production, and uro is referring to the urine. So uropoiesis is the production of urine by the kidneys. So urination is the word for eliminating urine from the body. So like going pee is what owners will often say. So urination has lots of equivalent words. So urination can also be called micturition, can also be called excretion, can also be called elimination, can also be called voiding. And then lastly, well, this is spelt wrong on mine. It has 2 L's. Crystalluria means that there's crystals in the urine. So it is possible for animals to have crystals in the urine. What happens if you have crystals in the urine? They kind of look like this. They'll all build up and float around in there. And when the animal urinates, they should just go out. If we have too many in there, it starts to what's called aggregate. So all those little crystals are going to stick together and they'll start to make a stone. If you've ever made like rock candy or anything like that, it's the same kind of idea. It makes a stone. It all clumps together. We don't want to see that in animals. Your bladder stones and bladder crystals or urinary crystals are 100% a nutritionally related disease. So if we have our animals on a good quality diet, we can prevent the formation of those crystals and we can prevent the formation of stones. Okay, that's all the terms I have for you for the urinary system. So you can read up on the urinary system in your Elsevier textbook on page 97 to 98, and it's covered in chapter 12 in your McBride textbook. And you have a review, a urinary review as well, available to you on the Brightspace. If you do have any questions, make sure you do ask them either in the virtual classroom or in the chat, or send me an email. All right, thank you so much for listening about the urinary system.